On July 29th, 1775, there were 4 letters that we could read. I'm going to choose one, and that one that I choose will be John Adams to Josiah Quincy, 29th of July, 1775. Now, who was Josiah Quincy? Josiah Quincy the First. I believe this is the correct Josiah Quincy who wrote this letter. He was an interesting character. He was an American merchant, planter, soldier, and politician, and the son of Colonel Edmund Quincy III and Dorothy Flint Quincy. He was named after his grandfather. After graduating from Harvard in 1728, he returned to Braintree, Massachusetts. In 1735, he moved to Boston and engaged in commerce and shipbuilding. Now, he was an American patriot and a supporter and a good friend of General George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. He also knew John Adams very well, and the reason for that is that, after, he basically, there was this trial of Captain Thomas Preston. Now, if you remember the Boston Massacre took place in 1770. And this was a moment when John Adams made his name as a lawyer with impartiality. Right now, let's quickly recap. The Boston Massacre took place in Boston on a snowy night. A bunch of troops were being basically taunted by a crowd of citizens, and they were throwing snowballs and clubs potentially at the troops, and the troops opened fire on the mob, killing many Bostonians. Now, it's unclear who gave the order to fire, but one Captain Thomas Preston was accused of giving the order to fire on the mob of people who were harassing the troops. This is unproven. The whole argument that John Adams made, basically, in Boston, no one wanted to defend Thomas Preston. The only lawyer who was willing to stand up and defend Thomas Preston was John Adams. And he did so because he believed in the law, and he believed that the law was impartial, and that the anger that Bostonians had about taxation and, basically mistreatment by the British Crown had no bearing on whether it was okay for a mob to harass soldiers. And John Adams made this argument in the British court, that Thomas Preston should not be hung for or punished in any way because he was threatened by a mob of citizens, and that was such a bold statement to make at the time because of the hostility that the people of Boston felt towards the British, that he gained a lot of popularity and respect from both the British and the colonists, who recognized the power of his argument. So Thomas Preston was, in a very unpopular way, he was acquitted because of John Adams. Now, John Adams was, in this trial, was arguing against Samuel, who Samuel was Josiah Quincy's son, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, Josiah's son Samuel was the Solicitor General for the English prosecuting Thomas Preston. No, wait, he was the Solicitor General for Boston. I'm not sure exactly which side he was on, but he basically was trying to prosecute this Captain Thomas Preston, and argue against John Adams. Now, John Adams, on the other hand, was working with Samuel's younger brother, also Josiah's other son, Josiah Quincy II. So Josiah Quincy II and John Adams argued against Samuel Quincy, and both sons argued against each other, and they were the son of Josiah Quincy being this wealthy merchant and a friend of John Adams. So this was a family affair. And so they had a very close connection to John Adams, and that gives you some context about who this man was. His name again was Josiah Quincy, and he wrote this letter that we will now read to John Adams. I'm sorry, John Adams wrote to Josiah Quincy on 29th of July, 1775. Philadelphia. Dear Sir, I had yesterday the honor of your letter of July the 11th, and I feel myself much obliged by your kind attention to me and my family, but much more by your care of the public safety and the judicious and important observations you have made. Your letters, sir, so far from being, quote, a burden, end quote, I consider as an honor to me, besides the pleasure and instruction they afford me. Believe me, sir, nothing is of more importance to me at my present most arduous and laborious employment than a constant correspondence with gentlemen of figure and experience, whose characters are known. The minutest fact, the most trivial event that is connected with the great American cause, becomes important in the present critical situation of affairs, when a revolution seems to be in the designs of Providence as important as any that ever happened in the affairs of mankind. We jointly lament the loss of a Quincy and a Warren, two characters as great in proportion to their age as any that I have ever known in America. Our country mourns the loss of both, and sincerely sympathizes with the feelings of the mother of the one and the father of the other. They were both my intimate friends, with whom I lived and conversed, with pleasure and advantage. I was animated by them in the painful, dangerous course of opposition to the oppressions brought upon our country, and the loss of them has wounded me too deeply to be easily healed. Quote, Dulce et decorum et pro patria mori, end quote. Now he's talking about the Battle of Bunker Hill, I believe, in which one of the Quincy sons, I believe Samuel Quincy, could be wrong, and then Joseph Warren, the famous Joseph Warren, both died in that battle. They were both killed. The ways of heaven are dark and intricate, but you may remember the words which many years ago you and I fondly admired, and which upon many occasions I have found advantage in recollecting. Why should I grieve when grieving I must bear? And take with guilt what guiltless I might share. I have a great opinion of your knowledge and judgment from long experience concerning the channels and islands in Boston Harbor. But I must confess, because remember, Josiah Quincy was a sailor. He went into the shipping business in Boston, in the docks. So that's why he's saying, John Adams is saying, I have a great opinion of your knowledge and judgment from long experience concerning the channels and islands in Boston Harbor. But I must confess your opinion that the harbor might be blocked up, and seamen and soldiers made prisoners at discretion was too bold and enterprising for me, who am not apt to startle at a daring proposal. But I believe I may safely promise you powder enough in a little time for any purpose whatever. We are assured in the strongest manner of saltpeter and powder in sufficient plenty another year of our own make. That both are made in this city, you may report with confidence, for I have seen both, and I have seen a set of very large powdered works, and another of saltpeter. I hope, sir, we shall never see a total stagnation of commerce for any length of time. Necessity will force open our ports. Trade, if I mistake not, will be more free than usual. Your friend, Dr. Franklin, to whom I read your letter, and who desires his compliments to you, has been employed in directing the construction of row galleys for this city. The Committee of Safety for this province have ordered 20 of them to be built. Some of them are finished. I have seen one of them. It has 12 oars on each side. They rowed up the river for the first time, 4 miles in an hour, against a tide which ran down 4 miles an hour. The Congress have recommended to the colonies to make provision for the defense of their navigation in their harbors, rivers, and on their sea coasts. A floating battery, I have no idea. Am glad you are contriving one. Oh, of a floating battery, I have no idea. Am glad you are contriving one. You tell me, sir, that General Lee complained that, quote, he did not find things as the Massachusetts delegates had represented them, end quote. What General Lee could mean by this, sir, I know not. What particulars he found different from the representation, I do not know, nor do I know which delegate from the Massachusetts he received a mistaken representation from. I think he should have been particular that he might not have ran the risk of doing an injury. If General Lee should do injustice to 2 of the Massachusetts delegates, he would commit ingratitude at the same time, for to 2 of them he certainly owes his promotion in the American army, how great a hazard soever they ran in agreeing to it. I know him very thoroughly, I think, and that he will do great service in our army at the beginning of things by forming it to order, skill, and discipline. But we shall soon have officers enough. Your friend and humble servant. So there's a little bit of a threat there. If General Lee doesn't keep his mouth shut, then they'll have other officers ready soon enough. So this is just a reminder, footnote number 3. In a letter to Robert Morris on 4th of July, Lee wrote that when he and the rest of Washington's party arrived in Cambridge, quote, we found everything exactly the reverse of what had been represented, end quote. He was referring to the lack of engineers and artillery and the apparent unwillingness of the soldiers to accept officers from outside New England. Now, I read that letter, so you can go back to July 4th, 1775, and listen to that video where I read it. And the next footnote, a reference to John Adams and Samuel Adams, who were instrumental in getting Lee appointed despite the opposition of Hancock, Payne, and Cushing. So these are the 5 delegates from Boston. And of course, Samuel Adams is the wealthy cousin of John Adams. John Adams and Sam Adams are very famous Bostonians, and they argued for General Lee to be given his position against Hancock, Payne, and Cushing, who were also from Boston. So, okay, there you go. That's the letter from John Adams to Josiah Quincy, 29th of July, 1775. If you like this, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.